Good morning, everyone. Daffodils is such a kind of poem that is beyond explanation. It hardly takes one page to have a printout of this particular poem. But while explaining this one, we need some thousand of pages. In thousand way we can explain this poem. As T.S. Eliot said, T.S. Eliot, a great poet and essayist, said, a poem is better understood when it is half understood. A poetry is like the human character. A poetry is like a human character. The way we explore the character of a person, in the same way we explore a poetry. And a good poetry, a beautifully drafted poetry, is really a thing to remember and cherish. In this particular poem, we have found that the poet was enchanted by the beauty of daffodils. But more than that, we have to accept the fact the poet got really blessed by a pair of beautiful eyes, which understood the hidden beauty in daffodils. He discarded the beauty of the waves, even he discarded the beauty of all other worldly things in front of that beauty of little daffodils. Now, if the poet had seen something else instead of daffodils, he would enjoy in the same way. So actually, the fact is that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, who is watching it. In our real life also, we find so many small things, but we undervalue those. So we hardly find beauty in those. So in this poetry, we are taught basically if we add morality in each poetry, then the real charm will be missing. Yet something to be learned from every poetry. And from here we learn that we should try to recognize the beauty, the quality and speciality related to each and every object in this world. Now, one thing we have to be very careful here, that the way the poet compared the daffodils to different objects, sometime he has used the simile that continuous as the stars that shine. So many similes are there, metaphors are there. First line only there is a simile. I wander lonely as a cloud. So this is one of the most important features of romantic poetry, the use of simile. Further, the poet used plenty of a plethora of figures of speech, whether it is hyperbole or we have found the poet used the figures of speech like personification, alliteration. So this is a part of romantic poetry, the use of figures of speech. Now if you search for the rhyme, now poetry is not all about rhyming. Sometimes a poetry is beyond rhyming. What is more important is that soul of the poetry should be more important than the rhyme. The poem does have rhyme, but not to that extent like Cold Within or like that Robert Southey's poetry, that After Blenheim. So that standard of rhyme we will not find. So this is not a ballad or song. Now we will make a small evaluation. This is the third part of this particular revision, and in this part what will you do? We will go through the figures of speech used in this poem. Keep it in mind, this poetry is a masterpiece, and almost everyone who studied in different schools, that means who experienced the school life, have studied this poetry, because this does have a universal appeal. Universal appeal means though the poetry, the setting is based in England, but you can see this is universal. Now, from here on, we can understand one thing, that we should not differentiate a poet by saying that he is Indian poet, American poet, or Australian poet, or English poet. A poet is a poet beyond any geographical boundary, because they write something that is universal, that is applicable to each and everyone, and this poetry is no exception. So, here in this video, in the last part of this video, let us discuss in a short format the figures of speech used here. Thank you very much. Here you go. First figures of speech used here is the first line. I wandered lonely as a cloud, where the poet himself compared himself as a cloud. So, this is an example of simile. Further, that floats over high over hills and wells, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Here, to somewhat it is a metaphor, since the daffodils are compared to the host of angels beside the lake, beneath the tree, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Here the daffodils has got the human status. So, this is an example of personification. Continuous as the stars that shine. So, since as it is used here, so it is going to be simile. And twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretch in never ending line. They means the daffodils. So, they stretched in never ending line. So, this is also an example of hyperbole. Nothing is stretched in never ending line along the margin of the day. 10,000 saw I at a glance. He saw 10,000 at a glance. He did not count that one. So, this is also an example of hyperbole. Tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Here, the daffodils get the human status, living status with this particular term. So, this is an example of personification. So, if I look at from the beginning, so what we have got? We have got first simile, and then we have got one metaphor. So, here one alliteration, double H, I am underlining that one with green color. Then if we move further, then what we are going to see, beside and beneath, this is also an example of alliteration. Further, if we move, we have got hyperbole. Then second last line, 10,000 saw I at a glance. This is also an example of hyperbole, and tossing their heads in sprightly dance in personification. The waves beside them dance. This is also an example of personification, where the waves are getting the human status. Out did the sparkling waves in gay. A poet could not but be gay in such jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth. This is alliteration. What wealth the soul to me had brought. So, this is the first phase of figures of speech we have got in these three stanzas. For often when on my couch I lie in vacant or pensive mode, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So, this is also with an example of personification. Every time the daffodils are getting the status of human. So, this is another example of personification. So, this is the first phase, or which are very much convenient to your syllabus. those are provided only. So hope this one will help you. Thank you.